On the next episode of Painting and Travel, Sarah tours the extensive layout of the Apple Valley Model Railroad Club in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Back in his studio, Roger paints an aging railroad engine using oils on canvas.
It's a very rainy day, which makes it perfect to do something inside, and Larry Morton and I are standing inside of this building right here. It's the Hendersonville, North Carolina train depot, and we'll take a look around and see a wonderful model railroad layout. But first, Roger's going to get a good start on his train painting.
This is a 24 by 36 inch oil-primed linen canvas, a very nice canvas. And of course, since it's primed with oils, the canvas, I'll be using oil paints today. I'll be painting a detail of this locomotive, and it's basically grays and blacks. It's a very monochromatic looking painting. Now, I will be mixing a lot of other colors in with my black there, because black is sort of a very lifeless color. And I'll be mixing some cool colors and some warm colors with that. Right now, I just want to block this in, and I'm going to try and do this quite quickly. Right here is the darkest area of this painting. So with my black, maybe ultramarine blue, and alizarin crimson, I'll put that in there. I think I'll use mostly the ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. That gives a very, very dark color, yet it's not totally black. I'm using quite a large brush to put that in. These are called trucks. These, when you have a set of wheels on railroad cars, they're called trucks. And this goes down. It's very, very dark in here. I generally like to start with my darks and work towards my lights, so that's kind of what I'm doing again here today. I've always loved railroads, and at one point I owned my own railroad caboose, which was quite beautiful. A restored wooden railroad caboose that originally ran on Henry Ford's railroad called the Detroit, Toledo, and Ironton Railroad. And the railroad caboose was built in, I believe it was 1926. And I also enjoyed building my own HO gauge railroad layout, and I did that for many years. This is a new brush that I have here, and has a nice edge on it, so I can cut quite a fine line here with this rather large brush. Well, I think I've finished putting in all these dark areas, the darkest areas. Now I'll move to my sort of middle tone grays, and I'll mix up a warmer color, because down in these wheels there's a lot of dust and particles and things that have blown up on these wheels. Really dusty look. And so I do get a warmer look than in some of these other areas. So I will take some of the cerulean blue and some yellow ochre and burnt sienna. I think that's probably about the right value. Now, as I get lighter in this painting, I can vary my brush strokes much more. The lighter areas of the painting can use more subtle variations in them. These dark areas, I don't want too much going on in there, because I don't want to bring the eye back into those dark, deep areas very much. But these lighter areas here, this is where the light is hitting it, and that's where I can see more variations of not only light and dark, but different colors. Right up here, I wanted to keep my brush strokes all pretty much vertical, This is sheet metal up here covering the diesel engines inside, but this has a little more going on in it, and of course, like I said earlier, it's lighter. So I can vary my brush strokes here, which will help to give it some interest. Every once in a while I can dip into my linseed oil and let this paint flow much easier. I'm going to jump over to these steps. They aren't quite as warm in color, but they're still slightly warm, certainly warmer than these areas. So here's a step right here. Here's a real rusty area of the painting. These are the couplers. We'll couple the cars together. Right here we have a lot going on. These are pipes and different connections. Right here we have the, it's almost like a cow catcher sort of thing. I don't think they call them cow catchers on these modern ones, but maybe they do. That's basically what this is. It's just a scoop that would get anything, push anything out of the way that gets in front of it. All right, right up here we have more of this middle tone. I've basically got in my big shapes now, my big areas. Now I just have to start whittling it down to these smaller areas. And right up here, I just keep filling this in a little bit at a time. This all just takes some time to do. But if I use a large enough brush, then that will cut this time down quite a bit. There'd be no real point in doing this with a much smaller brush. I'll get to the smaller brushes later on when I want to add the fine detail. As complicated as this painting may seem, really, if it's taken one step at a time, it's really not so bad. Just take one little area at a time and work on it, and then jump to the next area. One thing I don't want to do, however, is work on one area for very long. As I said, I want to get everything covered, and then I can go around and adjust these areas as need be. Now, as I continue to put some of this paint on this piece, I continue to make it thicker and thicker. I start out with some thin passages of paint, and if I want to add, for instance, a little more look of dust and everything up here, then I begin to apply thicker paint. Here we have some heavy-duty springs right there. We'll let that set up and dry, then we can go back and really get into the finer points of that. Move over here. This is part of the brake shoe right here, and there's some detail in there, but I think I'm just going to block this in one solid mass, and then when this sets up, go back in and add that detail. Now let's jump down here at a different part of the painting. This is the roadbed, and that's made up of a lot of rock, usually granite rock. So there'll be a lot of texture in here. And I can't put that texture in yet because I'm just using a large brush, but I sort of want to get this base coat, this base color in place. And then I'll probably let that set up for a while and then go back in and add the detail of those rocks. And I'll just use some rough brush work on that, and even that will help to give me the look of these rocks on this roadbed. Some more lead white, some blue, some brown. Just give that a grayish look. These railroad ties were not in very good shape, actually. They were split. They looked a little ragged. And right back here, there's lots more railroad tracks. There were about 8 or 9 different lines running through there. This was in a train yard. So what we have is a lot of horizontal lines back there, which are more tracks. Now, as these tracks go back, I can see less and less of the roadbed. So here we have 2 tracks, and then I can see some more roadbed right here. And then back again, there's 2 more tracks, and then some more roadbed. I think I'll use this same large brush. Now let's put in a few of these rails. So with my burnt sienna, and I'll cool that a bit with some blue. Okay, now I just need to load this brush up. I think I'll mix more paint here, just so I have enough paint there where I won't run out. Put a touch of thinner in there, maybe some linseed oil. Get that rather thin. Load this brush up. I'll start over here, and since I'm using this large brush, I bet I can go quite a ways without having to refill it. Here, I'm putting a lot of pressure on that brush, just to have that brush firmly against the canvas. If I have a light touch on that brush, then I would probably waver some, but by putting kind of a heavy touch on that, really laying that brush down, it helps to steady this. Here we go, just going across there again. Load my brush up one more time. I'm just making these one color for right now, but there are going to be some variations in that track. And I'll probably have to add those once this dries, at least sets up some. Here we have a second rail back here. These are the rails that this particular locomotive is sitting on. While I'm in the neighborhood, I guess I'll put in these railroad ties. First we have a little bit of these plates that hold down the track. You attach the track to the tie. Just put those in. Same color as the rail. They're very rusty. Now these ties are much darker. I'll take my Van Dyke brown and some blue, ultramarine blue. I think I'll just place them all in with a solid one color to begin with, and then we'll go back and make variations to that. Key is to put in these larger shapes, and then once I get the large shapes in, then I can begin to refine them. I'm going to work on the sky next, so I've got a razor blade and I'm taking off some of my paint, and I'll put in this sky. Now, the sky can pose a bit of a problem because I'm not sure how much color I want in this painting. If I want to keep it really sort of dirty and gritty, or if I want to sort of change the feeling of this painting and add a bright blue sky like in the photograph. I think I'm going to go with a warm sky. The warm look to this might be nice because we have so much cool areas back here in the engine itself. So I'm going to try that. So I think this yellow ochre and white, that might look pretty good. Just thin to begin with. That way I can see whether that might work or not. I think that's okay. Let's go with that for now. Now these light areas, I'll use much thicker paint on them than the dark areas. Now down here we have some trees and buildings. I think I'll leave out the buildings, but I will put in a suggestion of some trees. I don't want very much texture in that sky, so once I lay it on there, I'm going to smooth this just with some light strokes of my brush. Now I can't get into all the detail with this large brush, so I'll get my smaller brush here. And I can cut in right around these railings and things. Well, there's part of the freight station and all right back here. I don't want that in the painting. That's why I have my chromium oxide green out here. I'm going to put in sort of a vague look of some foliage back there and trees. And I want to keep this a very pale looking color. I don't want this to jump out into the foreground very much. So I'm going to just give that maybe kind of a foggy look back there, a very warm look. I don't want very much texture in this area either. I want this just to fade away. And this will be very nondescript back there. Once I get more of this finished, I may want to go back and add a few more details here, but we'll wait on that. And this nice white stripe that runs right along the side of this diesel. Now this white stripe has some beautiful rust, some subtle rust running down on it, but I won't put that rust on right now. I'll just put this stripe on, and then later when this sets up, we'll add that rust. Loading that brush up, a lot of paint, pressing that down and running that right along there. I'll have to let this dry a day or two before I can finish it, so this will be a good time to go back and join Sarah at the train depot.
I'm standing inside an old train depot here in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and this is Larry Morton, who is president of the Apple Valley Model Railroad Club. How much fun is the hobby?
It's tremendous. I retired 10 years ago, and I've never had more fun.
And do you meet a lot of people that have a similar interest?
Well, this area is particularly a hub for model railroading. We have almost 90 members in our club.
And everybody has a different specialty?
For the most part, yes. That's the beauty of a club, is we have expertise in all areas represented within the club. We have electrical engineers in the club, which are invaluable to getting all this to work properly. And fellows who are scenery specialists, and other fellows who are specialists at building the actual trains themselves, scratch building something, which means not working from a kit, but just buying raw plastic and lumber and building your own replica of something. We have other fellows that are great at doing the historical research for the railroad if we're trying to model something specific. So yeah, it takes all sorts of talents to put together a good model railroad.
Larry, how authentic is this section?
None of the sections are authentic, okay? One of the things you can do in a model railroad is you can choose to build an authentic layout and model towns or areas exactly as they were. And another is a completely freelanced layout, which this is.
But it certainly has an authentic look. I mean,
Right.
This is this area, and some of the buildings certainly look familiar to me.
Well, the idea here is to capture the flavor of Western North Carolina. Okay, so in each town, we wanted to put one or two structures that really exist in those towns, and the rest of the structures are just to cover the flavor of what was going on around the 1950s in Western North Carolina.
Lots of detail. I can see the individual shingles, and it's got a nice sign. Is a train layout like this constantly evolving?
Yes. Model railroaders say their layout is never complete. It's never done. Because just about the time you look at it and you can't think of anything else to do, you'll get an idea. Hey, I'd love to tear down the passenger station and build the one that really existed. Or, you know, some brainstorm pops up and you want to make a change to your layout.
That sounds really difficult to me, because the little I know about railroading, you've got to put the track in and get the grading just right to start with. Otherwise, you'll have a mess.
That's
the train
right.
won't quite
That's right.
make it up
It's the most important thing in building a model railroad is to have outstanding track work, so that you don't have any problems. You don't have any issues with trains coming off the track, or like you said, the grade is too steep and you can't pull a train up the grade. That is key to building a successful model railroad.
Is there any maintenance here?
Oh, the biggest thing is keeping the track clean. We're in an old, very porous building, which pulls in, there's also a lot of traffic right by the street here, so it pulls a lot of dust and dirt in here, and we are constantly cleaning the track to make the trains run well.
A tiny paintbrush or something?
Actually,
to
we
dust it
have
off?
track cleaning cars.
A track cleaning car?
Yes, there's tank cars with a cleaning fluid in them that disperses it on the rails.
So you don't have an on-off switch and the trains are running or not running. You're really engineering each train on each track, and you have to...
Each person running a train has a little handheld controller about the size of a pack of cigarettes, and he talks directly to the locomotive. There's a computer chip in every locomotive, and he is running the train. In the old days when I was a kid, you ran the tracks. You had a transformer that put power to the tracks. You would increase or decrease the voltage, and everything on the tracks would go in the same direction and would go faster or slower. Now we talk individually to each locomotive. With the evolution of miniature electronics, so much has happened in this hobby, like a lot of other hobbies too.
You can get better results than with
Yes.
the new technology. And the outcroppings, the rocks, the cliffside look terrific.
Plaster of Paris poured into rubber molds of real rocks.
Oh, well, that's why it looks so good. And then when you paint the buildings, it looks like some of them have been lightly distressed.
Yes. It's called weathering. Most of it's done with airbrushes.
This room has a little different look. It seems like it's a bit less about the scenery and more about lots of tracks and lots of trains. What's happening in here?
Well, when we built this whole layout, obviously we talked about what specifically we wanted to represent. And of course, being located here in Hendersonville, we wanted to include Hendersonville and Asheville. So that's the area that you're in here. So it's a little less rugged mountains and more metropolitan. Yeah, this would be a typical through freight that might come out of Knoxville, Tennessee, and come into Asheville and drop off some cars and pick up some other cars headed for points east through North Carolina. One of the things here is that club members can bring their own individual trains in here and run them. So you might come in here on a Saturday and see trains from the Northeast, trains from the West Coast, trains from Florida.
You know, I'd never thought about that as being one of the purposes of the Railroad Club, but it makes sense now that you said it. You might have your own beautiful train, locomotive, but not the space to run it. And so you can bring it in here and use the tracks that everybody's built and play with it here.
That's correct. I would say more of our members do not have layouts at home than those that do. And that is the beauty of the club. You can come in here and play with your trains.
What a nice idea, and make friends. And then, of course, you have this open to the public, and it's free, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes. We're open Wednesday afternoon and Saturdays from 10 to 2, year-round.
And I've noticed one section for children, too, that they could actually
yes.
get into a little bit. Larry, I've really enjoyed seeing the layout. It's amazingly nice, so intricate, and I can feel the love put into all of these trains and the buildings and all the scratch-built stuff. It's really great.
Well, thank you, and on behalf of the Apple Valley Model Railroad Club, you're welcome back anytime.
Good, I'll come back.
Well, this feels dry enough now where I can begin to add these details and finish this piece. I think I'll start by adding more texture in this area and more color. There's all sorts of dust and things that these wheels have picked up, so it does have a nice bit of patina to it. With my ultramarine blue and brown, I'll make that dark color. Then I can just reference my photograph carefully and put in these details where they're needed. I'm using a fairly large brush, but I'm just using the tip of this brush, and it gives me a fine enough point to do the job. And I've lost some of my drawing here, but there's enough reference marks here where I can really pick up on this quite easily. Well, really a few well-placed lines in here will give this the description it needs. And I'm going to take my burnt sienna and just add a little more rust here and there, just with a very, very light touch of my brush. And I think that should finish the detail here in these wheels. I'll take this burnt sienna, and as I mentioned earlier, there was some nice rust, just very subtle rust coming down off this white stripe. So I'm putting that in there, but it's too harsh right now. So I'll wash my brush out, dry it off, and then just soften these areas with a dry brush. And that way those edges won't be so hard. And with some more burnt sienna, just accent a few of those rust spots. There. Add a few little details on this spike. A few of these details have gotten lost, so I'm taking a pastel pencil and I'm sketching a few of these areas that need to be accurate. And I'm still using this large brush, but as you can see, I can get a pretty good fine line with this. I had to sketch this to be sure that this side matched this side. There's really not as much detail as I thought there was when I first started this painting. It's all fairly straightforward, all fairly simple. A little rust here and there. So I just go at this a little bit at a time. Well, to finish this painting, I'm going to put in these yellow rails. So I'm taking my white, some yellow. These are kind of a yellow-orange color. I'll use my ruler. I'll also start over here, and I'll load up my brush. I'll put in these railings. And I'm using quite a bit of paint on my brush, so it will flow off the brush. And we have this railing coming down here, curves just a bit, and then continues on down. Load my brush up once again, and bring it on down to where it ends right here. I'm just using this ruler as a guide. I'm holding my finger on this ruler, and that will just help me to create that straight line. One down here. We'll keep on moving down. And then we have some little indentations right in here. That's where the corrugation is for that step plate. Move up to those next set of stairs. We have these same indentations here. And I think I'll finish this painting by adding a touch more rust down here on these rails. And with a touch of the brush, I'll just tap in a few of these areas, give it a little more life. Well, it was really fun painting this diesel engine, a little bit different subject. So I'll pick up this small brush and I'll sign it, and we'll call this painting finished.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.